Hello everyone. Welcome to yet another Lemnisk videocast where we speak with global thought leaders in business, digital, martech, customer experience, etc. I'm Shalaka Desai. I'm client partner in customer success org at Lemnisk. Today's topic is pillars of successful D2C customer experience. And first off, it's my pleasure to welcome Chaitanya Ram Lingegoda, co-founder of WakeFit, India's leading sleep solutions company. In just a short span of time, WakeFit has become a profitable multi-million dollar venture. Chaitanya has about 17 years of experience in entrepreneurship, management consulting, and marketing. His previous engagements have been across India, North America, Europe, with Fortune 500 clients, across various industries. Currently, he's invested in advertising startups for their growth and funding strategies. So, welcome, Chaitanya. It's really my pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Shalaka.
Yeah. So our second speaker is Subra Krishnan, CEO at Lemnisk. Lemnisk is a leading customer data platform company with real-time marketing automation capabilities. Welcome again, Subra. So diving straight in, into our topic for today. First off, Chaitanya, since our topic today revolves around customer experience, I would sort of try to start with the broader pillars and then dive slowly deeper inside. So, for a startup like WakeFit, what are the sort of CX pillars that you focus on? I know out there in the market, when you start looking at best strategies and so on, you see a lot of talk, a lot of share of voice from bigger D2C brands which have a lot of cash to pump into activities like brand building and so on. But from a startup context, how do you sort of take these best practices and adapt it to your context and just start talking into how does that work?
I think for us at every juncture and every decision that we make, customer experience is always at the center of it. And the primary reason is exactly what you said. As a startup, the only thing that we have in our control is to deliver a great customer experience once they come onto our site and start engaging with us. Whether it's marketing, whether it is a nice branding message, whether IPL sponsorships, we cannot do that. And in fact, I personally believe that it's a boring way to build a brand. If you have to spend money and spend hundreds of crores every year, and that's what companies from 50 years ago also did, and now you're doing the same thing, that's not exciting enough for us to do. So if there is a creative way, if there is an innovative way, then customer experience is one of those major pillars to build a brand, because that is when every single customer that comes and buys becomes your advocate, and no amount of branding can defeat that. So we believe that, and upcoming Diwali, for example, is always a big time for us, just like any other e-commerce company. We are not thinking about branding initiatives. We're not thinking about growth initiatives. We are thinking at 4x the scale, at 5x the scale that usually happens, sometimes 10x the scale on some days during Diwali. How do we ensure that the customer experience remains the same that they would have on a normal non-sale day? So we are putting our heart and soul into that problem. And to answer your question on what constitutes customer experience, um, it's multiple levels. At the first level, it's the product itself. No amount of marketing can camouflage a shitty product. If it is good, it's good. It is shitty, it is shitty. You cannot do anything about it. So, as a D2C company, the first part of customer experience is to get the product right. Is it the right product at the right cost point and the right value proposition that the customer in that sector is seeking? The second big pillar of customer experience is very, very simple and transparent terms and conditions and policies. We cannot behave like a traditional company where there is some fine print hidden somewhere which will say we will refund only this much if your trial period may you do this. Uh, Very simple. If we are saying 100-day trial period, we better follow it. If we are saying 10-year warranty, we better keep that promise. So there cannot be something hidden, some fine print somewhere, and then try to take the customer for a ride. All of those things are gone. I mean, if you are a D2C brand, every single thing about you, good or bad, is out there on the internet. So you better have these very simple policies and stick to those public promises. And the third one is for us a big area, our customer experience team itself, which means we are not here only to solve your support queries. Obviously, they will come. Obviously, there'll be a few delayed deliveries, a few you ordered wrong size and you want to change it. Okay, we are there. But bulk of our efforts should go into delighting you. Can we tell you how to use the product best? Can we tell you how to make the most of your product in terms of longevity? Can we tell you how to care for it? Can we tell you what should be done when there is a baby at home or when there's a senior citizen at home? Can we really enable you to use your Wakefit product well so that you derive the most value for the money that you've spent? So for us, these are the three big pillars of customer experience. The product itself, secondly, very simple public promises, and thirdly, a customer experience team that is always there to delight you, not just handle support queries.
And I think one of the things I can say here, Chaitanya, because I know you well, is and I think this is probably true of anybody that's trying to build a successful D2C brand as well. I think building all of these on a foundation of authenticity is really important, I think, right? I really feel that a lot of what Wakefit has done in terms of marketing itself and positioning itself ultimately reflects so well on you, Chaitanya, and maybe the other founders as well, though I don't know them as well. And I think your authenticity is grounded in two things. A, you are genuine, and you're wickedly funny. I know that. I mean, you've always been the heart and soul of, for example, the ISB batch as well, when we were doing the course together. And in many ways, I think the ability to connect with your target audience is because your customer experience is grounded in some of these characteristics which are fundamentally authentic. I would probably call that out as well.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And for us, authenticity is not some brand message. We are ultimately normal middle-class people.
Yeah, exactly.
First time, it's a third venture for me, second venture for my co-founder. Failed, tried, succeeded now to some degree. So now we are just saying, hey, if we were a normal middle-class customer, just like we are now, and we went and bought from somewhere, what is the kind of service we expected? What is the kind of transparency we expected? It's very simple.
Yeah, so one of the things that I got reminded of when you said that, Chaitanya, was, nothing kills a bad product faster than good marketing, right? So really great message. So just moving on quickly into more of the channel strategy part of, customer experience. So while Amazon, might still be contributing to the highest, volumes and so on, what do you have some sort of long-term play when it comes to direct to customer, and how are you working that from ground up?
A minor correction, our website is the largest channel, over 70%. Yeah,
over 70%, that's true. Yeah.
70% plus of our annualized revenue comes from our website. About 30% is the rest of the marketplaces put together, and that's been always a conscious effort. Whether it's on distribution or whether it's on marketing, we always focused on de-risking ourselves. We can never be dependent on one marketplace or one marketing channel, which could be Google or Facebook or Instagram. It has to be de-risked. It has to be multiple channels for both percentages. So if you look at, say, marketplaces, the biggest thing that you'll notice is any marketplace ultimately wants to squeeze the seller because their survival is dependent on them. You can't blame them. That is their business model. They will invest heavily in a category, and once that category gets built up, they will up their commissions, and then you are at their mercy.
Yeah.
Similarly, on marketing, you have all of these channels. There's Google, there's Facebook, there's Instagram, there's YouTube, bunch of places, right? And if you become over-dependent for your traffic only on one person, then again, the same thing happens. You end up constantly upping that spend, and that eats into your margins. So we've ensured that word of mouth, customer advocacy, customer stories and testimonials, organic SEO, being present on multiple search engines, all of these things are day-to-day things that we do very religiously, because that's what ultimately is the foundation. Marketing, I believe, doesn't boil down to a few jazzy, sexy campaigns. It boils down to 1,000 day-to-day things that you do religiously without failing.
And I think you pointed out virality and word of mouth. I'll just latch on to that. I think, and among the other channels that you spoke of, just the sheer quality of and the brilliance of content that comes out of, let's say, the Wakefit stables. I would probably call that out. I mean, whether it's a sleep intern program, or I think the pandemic videos that you did with Sumit Vyas and a few others that, I mean, very quickly became a rage. The Wakefit late nights program where you have folks like Dev Dutt coming in. I mean, these are all brilliant examples of how to go about building virality, word of mouth, because they just help connect with your target audience at such a deep, emotional level as well. So I think that is foundational as well. I would probably call that out as well. Yeah.
True. And like you rightly said, we cannot chase virality. When we are creating something, we don't know whether people will like it, whether they will resonate with it. It's a sincere effort, and then we put in our efforts to distribute that. And once it picks up, it picks up. And we've been very fortunate to have 3 really viral initiatives where it resonated with what people were feeling at that time. And going back to what you said, it is because of authenticity. We weren't trying to push a sale there. We said, this is what you're feeling as an audience. We will give you this. You'll be entertained, and we'll give you a nugget of knowledge that will make your life better. That's all. That was the simple thought. And that's why people resonated with it.
So then I know it's a sort of detour from the conversation, but I do want to take this quick detour and because I think it's going to be important for people to try and understand the thought process that you have behind this, right? So one of the things you said is when you put together content like this, right? Then the idea is, are you able to latch into the prevailing sort of mindset, and also are you authentic, right? In sort of sending this message. Talk us through some of the other kind of content that you prepared, which might not have taken off, and what were the learnings there. I think this can also be useful for the audience. Anything that comes to mind in that sense?
Actually, there's a lot of content that we've done which has not become viral, but they've got their own 300, 400,000 views on their own. So that's a success for us also. I'll give you an example. We did a series on how to create your bedroom to make it look like a hotel bedroom. How to make your bed to make it like a very cozy and comfortable room to sleep. We did a series of 10 videos, and none of them became viral. But each of them, since the time we've launched, have reached 150, 200, 300,000 views with no money being spent. So that was because it was scientifically figured out that people are looking for this kind of content. They want to create a bedroom that's cozy.
Very interesting.
Yeah. And when people are spending time at home, they figure out that Indian homes are very small, especially in cities. So the same room, the same living room has become entertainment room, school, your workspace, your dining table, everything is the same. So now suddenly they value that private space of a bedroom where they say, hey, this is where I want to relax. This is where I want to read a book. This is where I want to sleep. And how do you create that? So we created that content and it resonated.
Wonderful. And I think this is so many nuggets here for people who are building D2C brands. Very, very, very insightful, this one, I think. Yeah. Sorry, Shalaka, back to you.
And one thing that I've noticed so far that you've sort of got better than most other D2C startups that are, struggling to scale in this space is getting that customer data strategy right from the get-go itself. You also mentioned that about 70% of your sales are directly coming from your website. Now that is directly some data that you already own, right? And then on top of that, getting intel right from there, connecting it with other sources of intel, and then activating it for better conversations with the customers is something you have a lot in your ownership now. So for startups in this space, what do you recommend as a strategy for customer data right from the start? Are there any temptations that they should stay away from, maybe in order to just grow quickly? And it's all yours. Go ahead.
You're very right. It's as a new startup with no factory, with no logistics support, it is extremely tempting when a marketplace comes and tells you that, hey, you just launch, I'll handle everything. You just make money. It's a very, very tempting thing because you don't have to set up your logistics. You don't have to set up your website. You don't have to do any brand spending outside. And they're saying customer queries also will handle. So that's a very tempting thing to do. You're just starting off. You don't have any money. But the long-term problem with that is you don't own the relationships. That marketplace owns the relationship. So even from day one, we use the marketplaces as a listing platform because we wanted to be present, not to be using all their auxiliary services. But on our website, like you rightly said, we own the whole relationship. So in both places, we ensure that we get the customer data And once we get that, we only do value added things. We never spam. We don't sell that data to anyone. We only do things that they've given us permission to do, which is send me offers once in a month, once in a quarter, send me new product launches, send me value added stuff on how to sleep better. What happens during Mother's Day month, we did a whole series of articles on how new mothers and older mothers also to sleep better given their stage of life. So if you're a new mother, if you have a teenage kid, if you have an older kid, if you yourself are an older mother, we created a whole series of articles which people shared because Mother's Day was related to that. And during the pandemic, we did a whole bunch of articles called the Lockdown Manual. How can you be productive in your home? How can you set up a nice workspace? How can you split the professional and personal boundaries so that the association of the mattress is sleep, not stressful work? We ran a few expert workshops where people ran fitness, nutrition, because ultimately posture and sleep quality is dependent on multiple other parameters, not just one equipment. So we gave them that knowledge. So as soon as we say we will not misuse your data, but we will use it to add value to your life, then people are okay to share that. They're okay not to unsubscribe. But the onus lies on us to not abuse that relationship. Uh, so yeah, I think customer data from day one has been important, and I would say not to fall into the trap of just revenue and not getting customer data. If you don't own their relationship, you can never engage them. It's a transaction, not a relationship.
And Chaitanya, on that, I have a follow-up question. So obviously, the great thing, because you have your own independent distribution channel through the website, etc., is you're collecting a lot of that data. Can you talk us a little bit through the ways in which you organize it, the ways in which you slice dice the data? How do you try to identify insights about what's working for you from a business metric standpoint, what's not? Just your thought process and some of the exercises that you do would be incredibly insightful as well.
The usual e-commerce analysis, Subra. We look at cohort analysis. We look at bundling analysis. Which ones are bought together? We look at what can be recommended. What are the usual upselling and cross-selling opportunities based on historical data, city-wise, demographic-wise, behavior-wise, channel-wise. We do a ton of analysis, and that informs our marketing decisions, that informs our growth decisions, that informs our tool decisions. Honestly, this did not happen on day one. A lot of the decision in year one, year two were survival growth. Then came we now know what kind of data is there. Let us as founders sit and do some basic Excel analysis. Yeah. Then it became that, hey, let's hire a few junior data analysts. Then it became a full-fledged data science team where we felt the value of that. It did not happen on day one. It was an organic evolution. We were believers, but the investment had to be made at the right time.
That's ultimately the playbook for any D2C brand is always about in fact, data is so critical even before you start, because fundamentally D2C is about establishing, I guess, a rapid market share in a specific and meaningful segment that maybe the larger players or the more established players are ignoring or not catering to. So one could argue that getting that right is also all about data and sort of the consumer research that you do. And then the next pillar would be creating a delightful experience, which again boils down to data. And then the third thing is, once you have a satisfied base, like what you are doing, expanding into home solutions now would be to expand out of the core offering. And that also is about data. So I think really comes down to data at every stage of building a successful D2C brand, right?
True.
Yeah.
So lastly, moving to the final set of our discussion, how well are you sleeping in the pandemic, Chaitanya? So basically, how well is the Wakefit business going? I'm sure, just my hypothesis that the lockdown might have sort of increased the need for better sleep and better focus at home, as you rightly mentioned. So are there any new CX lessons that you've learned in this pandemic, and how are you utilizing them?
I wonder if any founder has slept well during this. But I think we constantly talk to customers, talk to the media about the importance of sleep, about the importance of posture, ergonomic sitting posture, sleeping posture. Our whole home solutions range is based on ergonomic designs. And our whole mattress and other products are enabling you to sleep better. But we as founders, it's a constant battle uh, to to find that balance, to not be obsessive about just the business, but also to be multidimensional, read new things, learn new things. There's nobody sitting and doing our performance appraisal, right? So you have to, if you have to grow, you put in that effort on your own. You go meet people, you go read a book, you listen to podcasts, you look at videos. So that way, it's a constant battle between the what the business demands, what you're obsessing about, and your own personal growth, so that you become a better leader. So that way, the pandemic definitely threw us all a big curveball. But two things happened. The first one was that we were able to launch home solutions full categories about 9 months before plan.
Yeah.
So the initial plan was that we were going to do R&D prototyping while the core business is chugging along, keeping us busy. We will do this in parallel and launch somewhere in Jan or so. But suddenly we were sitting on our hands for 50 days because of the forced lockdown. So we said, okay, let's use that time to bring ahead the launch itself. So we completed the prototyping, ordered machinery, got into sourcing agreements, set up the factories, all remotely. And then when the pandemic was over, it was ready for launch. So that became a blessing in disguise. You, as founders, you are pathologically inclined to find silver linings where none exist. So we saw this and we figured out something that can be expedited. The second big thing that happened was that downtime gave us time to connect with our customers. So during that 50 days when there were no orders at all, our factories were shut, our offices were shut. From March 22nd to May 4th, when the first unlock started, we picked up our customer data from 2017, 2018, 2019, and we just called them and said, hey, we're calling from Wakefit. As per WHO, these are the best precautions to take. As per the CDC and government norms, these are the best precautions to take. This is how you can keep your immunity up. Please go ahead. We are also sharing a few links. Take care of yourself. And we did not sell. We did not try to make money. Nothing. We just said, hey, this is what we know. We are just sharing it with you. All the best. And a bunch of them ended up asking, have you launched anything? It's been a while since I spoke to you. Are there any new products? Have you launched this in my pin code? So we ended up talking, but the objective was not selling. We did not make one line of a pitch. So both were blessings in disguise. We were able to connect with people we had not touched in a long time. And secondly, we ended up launching a whole new set of categories very soon. So that way, I think it's a battle, to answer your question, to be disciplined about your own personal health and wellness habits.
And as you look ahead, at the next few quarters, the promise of a vaccine is always around the corner. How are you assessing, let's say, the rest of this FY and next FY? How are you thinking about it?
I'm a big believer that e-commerce's second generation of users in India, which are going to be born now, as in not born on earth, but born as online customers, now are those who will discover the true value of e-commerce. The convenience, the safety, the ability to use products in the comfort of your home and then return if it doesn't fit. I think those are the true reasons why e-commerce should have grown. But due to various ecosystem activities, ecosystem pressures to push up the usage between 2007 and 2020, there was a very different kind of behavior. People were coming primarily for discounts. So now we see that it's at an inflection point where it will always do well, and people will discover the true value, and we are gearing up to that. So even at this large base of revenue, we are still projecting a very high number for this financial year and working towards that.
Wonderful. I think just the sheer 2 or 3 big takeaways that everybody should have. I think founding your customer experience on authenticity, on data, being true to yourself, and having the customer at the heart of every decision that you make. And big learnings for everyone from this podcast.
Thank you for having me. I hope it was useful to the audience.
Thank you so much. It was amazing. I think with the kind of podcast that we have done so far, this one was slightly unique in the sense that we spoke to a startup founder and then actually found the business side of things rather than focus a lot on marketing, etc. So great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.